Yeah, so this is a Christmas special metrics presentation on connectome workbench, which is the gift that keeps on giving. So obviously this is not the first time I've been talking about connectome workbench, and I'll continue to talk about it for as long as people need me to. So I'm moving back to New Zealand, and so I hope to impart some wisdom upon you guys. Does anybody, this is a legitimate question, does anybody know what South Korea is actually supposed to be? So this is not South Korea, just like this is not Japan. Because nobody knows where New Zealand is.
But Australia doesn't like touch anything, does it?
No, I mean, this is just a terrible world map.
Yeah, that map's not making sense.
I know, that's the point. Okay, so this is a flop. This is New Zealand.
Yeah, we got that.
This is Australia. This is not South Korea. This is Papua New Guinea. It doesn't matter.
Does Papua New Guinea touch?
No, it doesn't. This is just a terrible world map.
Okay.
Then you can't expect us to know.
So most of my PhD has been trying to get really nice maps of the surface. So this is what I'd started out as, which is obviously very terrible, and this is what I've been working towards. This is what my the latter half of my PhD journey has been. Sorry, Emma. But actually, being in the lab has been really, really great. I'm very sad to be leaving. And obviously, all of our lab depends on surface data, and that surface data comes from data processing. So this is kind of what this is about. I don't want this to happen. So, I want to be in New Zealand. I want Metrics Lab to be thriving. And I want you guys to be able to generate your own surface data and not be like the rest of the world and just wait for it to be given to you. I think that's enough jokes for now. So what I'm going to do is go through how to use connectome workbench, and it's going to be in like an applied sense. So I'm going to focus on the primary motor cortex, which is highlighted here in red. So this is a map that's drawn by Corbini and Brodmann in like the early 1900s. And what he did is he looked at slices of brain under a microscope and classified areas based on the cellular organization of the cortical layers. And so the primary motor cortex sits in the precentral gyrus. And a couple of decades later, it was, I guess, a lot of electrophysiology experiments. Basically, you're stimulating different parts of the primary motor cortex, and you're figuring out what parts of the body are represented. And so they found out that there's a representation of the body that goes, well, classically from toe to face. And this is called a homunculus, which was described by Wilder Penfield in 1948. And the main idea here is that the behaviorally relevant parts of the motor cortex are expanded. So things like our mouth, which we use for talking, and our hands, which are dexterous and we have opposable thumbs, all of that jazz, these parts of the body take up more surface area in the motor cortex than other parts like feet. And we can look at other properties of the motor cortex, so we don't look at just the cellular organization of the cortical layers, but we can look at what is called its myeloarchitectonic properties, so how the different myelin fibers traverse through the cortex. And this is just a slightly different map of the cortex based on how densely each part of the cortex is myelinated. So 42, 39, and 43 represent the primary motor cortex, and these are very, very densely myelinated, which is why they're coming up as black. So this is all the cool stuff that can be done invasively. And I mean, this is not projecting very well, but if you look at cortical areas under a microscope.
Not that one,
you can see that the boundaries between different areas are very sharply demarcated. So we've got area 4 here, which is a lot thicker than this neighboring cortical area, which is 3A. And what we've stained for here is myelin, so this appears a lot darker than here. So basically the properties of the motor cortex that we're looking at are cortical thickness and myelination. This isn't projecting very well, but what you can see on MRI as well, if you put this tissue block in a scanner, is that you can see quite clearly a change in what is called the T1 relaxation between area 3A, which is here, and area 4. So you're able to probe these different tissue properties in MRI as well as invasively. And so one of the things that we use in this lab is something called the T1/T2 ratio. So if we zoom in on a bit of cortex, so this is the central sulcus here, we can see, I mean, typically if we look at a T1 volume, the white matter is white and the grey matter is grey. And if you're taking a zoomed out view, everything looks pretty homogeneous. But if you zoom in, you can actually see that there are different shades of grey that vary throughout the cortex. If you look at a T2 volume, where the contrast's inverse, you see the same thing. And what you can do to accentuate this contrast is divide the T1 image by the T2 image. And if you change the color palette, you'll see that different areas have different myelin content. And so area 4, like we said, we expect it to have high myelin. So a high T1/T2 corresponds to a high myelination. Now I know everyone says, oh, it's not myelin. It's not really the point. It's been validated histologically and works very well. And also compared to other quantitative myelin mapping methods, it looks very, very similar. So in terms of bang for buck, T1/T2 is very good. So in order to get this T1/T2 map, we take our volumes and we can do this WB command volume math. And this fix and and didn't work like I thought it would. So an example command would be W command volume math, and we have our expression here, which is T1/T2. Our output is going to be called myelin map, and it's a volume. We've assigned our first variable, T1W, is our T1 image, and then our next variable, T2W, is our T2 image. And so that's how we use any math command. The same can be done for cifti math or metric math.
So the point is that you define your, basically it's performing voxel-wise or vertex-wise, and you're defining the names of the variables below, which then get put into this math operation that's in groups. Yeah. And it's the same for all of the metric math.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is like a very flexible command. If you do WB command volume math, it tells you can do and or operations. You can do x greater than a certain value. You can do a lot with it, and get very complicated expressions if you want. But we're not going to be working with volumetric registration. We want to be working on data that's on the surface. So yeah, exactly. The cortex is a sphere, and it always has been. And so we need to get this volumetric representation onto the surface. So how do we do that? Well, there's another command that's called volume to surface mapping. Basically, it takes in whatever data we have on the surface, in the volume. We give it a surface that we want to map it to, and then we need to specify the name of the metric file that we're going to create. There are two options for this. One is ribbon constrained. So I should say outright, you first need to double check that your surface that you're using and your volume are in alignment. The command will not fail, I don't think, if they don't overlap. So this needs to be QC'd. The next point to make is that the surface we usually project to is the mid-thickness surface, which is an average of the peel and the white matter. There are two options for defining how you do this volume to surface projection. The first is ribbon constrained, where you say the cortical ribbon exists between this inner surface, which is the white matter, and the outer surface, which is the peel. And this option is used for volumetric, projection of fMRI data to the surface. This Mylan style exists specifically for T1 over T2. Again, so we take in our volume that we want to project to the surface. We specify the surface that we're going to project to. We define what our output file is going to be called, and we specify either Mylan style or ribbon constrained. Yes, you have to look at your imaging data. Otherwise, what's the point? So we should be getting something that looks like this. This is a T1 over T2 ratio map, and it's mainly used for highlighting these hotspots of high T1 over T2. So we've got the primary motor cortex running along the precentral gyrus. We've got our frontal eye fields that exist here, the MT complex here, and the lateral intraparietal area here. So that looks good. Now, all of this has been done in a subject's native space. We need to get it into a common coordinate space that we can examine all subjects in. So that's the job of image registration. I'm not going to be going over that. That can be, there are many people who are experts here in image registration. So I'm not really going to talk about it. Saga's already talked about metric resample, and I'm not really going to talk about it too much, other than to say that this is how we get our T1 over T2 map into a common coordinate space with other subjects. So we have our Mylan map that exists in its native space. We have a subject's sphere that has been registered to a standard sphere in whatever configuration you're interested in doing. With MSM, obviously. I mean, there's no other option. And then we get our Mylan map that's in template space. And we also want to do an area correction that Saga's already discussed previously. Metric resample and the volume to surface mapping, they need to be done separately for both hemispheres. So the next thing I want to talk about is a cifti file. So basically what a cifti file is it's a way of representing different components of brain anatomy in the most representative geometry, which is a way of saying that anything that is subcortical should be represented with voxels and therefore a volume, and anything that exists on the cortex should be represented as a surface, and so we use vertices. So a cifti file is a combination of both of those things. So if you've used Python or nibabel to load a surface, you will see that it will give you a metric file, for instance. You'll see that it gives you a single vector that is however many channels times the number of vertices that exist. If you do the same thing with a cifti file, you will see that it has approximately 91,000 rows. The first 30,000 of those correspond to the left hemisphere, and then the right hemisphere, and then everything that is subcortical. And if you want to know more about the different types of cifti file, which is extremely useful if you're working with fMRI time series or you're working with parcellated data, this is probably where you should go to have a look. So with, and the reason that I'm talking to you about cifti files is they're quite easy to work with, they're quite easy to perform operations on as well. And so what we want to do is we want to create a dense scalar. So we want to combine our left and right myelin maps into a single file. And there's no volumetric component to this. So we take our, we first specify what we're going to call this file, which is a descalar. We take our left metric, and we only include vertices. This left ROI is a mask that says I want to only include everything that is in the cortex, and I want to exclude everything that is midbrain. So basically you want to exclude stuff from the cut. And you do the same thing for the right hemisphere. This left ROI, right ROI, they can be, for adults anyway, they can be downloaded from the HCP GitHub. So if you navigate to global templates and standard methods, this is where you'll find all of your standard spheres. So 32K, 59K, 164. You'll also find things like the different myelin map and focal depth templates, some cortical masks, etc. So this is what is used for adults.
And your baby, the babies are all the baby templates are on biomedia's braindevelopment.org.
Yeah, yes, I should.
Website.
Yeah.
But there's multiple braindevelopment.org. So I think it's brain-development or not.
Yeah, it's a dash. There's a dash.
If you search for biomedia braindevelopment.org, then it will come up. Otherwise,
yeah.
I never remember. It's all on there.
Okay, and so yeah, once you have all of your single subject cifti files, you can use the cifti average command where you'll specify your output, which is maybe your group average myelin map, and then you include the cifti flag, and you basically do the cifti flag and then a single subject cifti file, and you just repeat that for as many subjects as you want to average. If you're working with metric files, you'd first have to merge them and then average them. So it's easier to just put them into a cifti file and then average them. Yes, that's an example. So we're going to create a group average HCP myelin map, and we're just going to average all of our subjects together. And this does both left and right hemispheres together. And
the decode matters.
Yeah, it'll also do the voxels as well if you've got a volume component to it. Exactly. For the myelin map we don't, but if you're working with time series and you want to average time series, it will also average the voxels as well. And so let's say at the end of that we get 3 maps that we're interested in for delineating the motor cortex. The first is the T1/T2 ratio, the second is cortical thickness, and the third is an average curvature map. So these are all group averages from the HCP. Now that we have this information, how do we define a cortical area at a group level? So what we want to do is we want to look for sharp changes in a cortical feature. And these sharp changes should overlap across features as well. They should coincide with one another. We want to make sure that the cortex that exists on either side of the boundary is significantly different. It's quite handy if we can map histological boundaries to the surface. It's also nice if we know that it doesn't correspond with any sort of imaging artifact. And it's also good if it exists in both hemispheres. And so I'm going to talk about Area 55B again because that's the best example of how all of these boundaries coincide. So Area 55B is this little area that exists between the frontal and the posterior eye fields. In terms of the myelin map, it has a relatively low myelin compared to its neighbors. It's activated during this language task. If we place a seed in this area called PSL, it will light up. And if we also place another functional seed in this lateral interparietal area, we can see that the frontal and the posterior eye fields will light up, but 55B is not. So we can try and draw boundaries around each of these regions. But a better way to do it is to get an objective measure of how fast these features are changing over the cortical surface. And this is what this gradient map represents. So everywhere where the cortical maps are red, this is where cortical features are changing the fastest. And so what you can hopefully see is that there's a red line around 55B across all of these channels, and we can use that to objectively define area 55B. And to get these maps, we can use cifti gradient. So we take in our input cifti, one of the group average maps, direction, because these cifti files have both row and column dimensions. Everything is usually done along column, so you can almost always default to column as a direction. You output your gradient cifti file, and you need to specify the surface that you want to calculate this gradient operation on, plus the surface area of this, the surface area of this surface. So that's an example of how you might use cifti gradient.
Sorry, what is the difference between
So what's
left corrected areas and like what is?
Yeah, so
like why do you use it?
Yeah, so if the surface area of a surface will only be real if the triangles of that surface have not been distorted. So,
is that just the vertex areas?
Yeah, so this is vertex areas here. So you're saying, I want to calculate the gradient of, this is basically for neighborhood information. This is to give it some sort of magnitude.
Like you wouldn't be able to calculate directly.
It would, but the triangles, the area of the triangles don't have any really meaningful information here. Because
but so that came from when it was inserted to K?
This came from its native space.
Yeah, okay.
And then you resampled it into template space and averaged across subjects, etc.
So if you did this all in native space, you wouldn't need to use the correct areas.
Yeah, and it was a single subject. Yeah, exactly. And sorry.
Wait, what? Sorry, incorporated. So
it's just that the areas were calculated like for the resampling.
If you calculate the surface area of a mid-thickness surface that has been resampled from its native to its 32.
All the areas will be the same.
Yeah, so you need to calculate it before.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so you need to calculate.
Why can't you calculate a gradient of 32 km?
No, you can. It's just the areas that.
I think
it's just giving extra information about what the areas actually are.
Why is it called corrected areas?
Because if you
If it tries to extract the areas from just that one, then it won't get any useful information, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to have to take my phone.
Okay. Moving on. And you get your surface areas by using the surface vertex areas command.
It's coming out. Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So you can draw lines, or you can be fancy and call it observer independent boundary delineation. And so where was I going with this? Oh, yeah. So now that you've seen an example for area 55B, we can take the same idea and move forward and try and map the motor cortex. This is terrible because unfortunately all the vertices are represented in red. So I'll go to my workstation.
You put red on red.
No, you can't change the color of them. So what you can do to delineate the border is you've opened all of your tabs in Workbench. You then navigate to Edit Borders. You go to Draw, New, and you basically, you want to put, you want to place dots, whatever you want to call them, spheres, along the boundary where cortical thickness in this case is changing the fastest. So we know that this probably represents the posterior boundary of the motor cortex. You'll go around, loop around, and then we can see that the anterior border of the motor cortex is represented by this really sharp change in the myelin. So we continue moving down until they meet at the bottom. And so what we've delineated now is hopefully something that corresponds to the primary motor cortex. And what we can see here is this one here. So this is the gradient of cortical thickness, sorry. So this is the group average myelin. This is the group average myelin gradient. This is cortical thickness. This is the cortical thickness gradient.
And you're going for like the middle.
Yeah, so how did you define on that one? Or is it, do you just define on that one?
So you try and use both of them. So at the posterior border, they both kind of line up. So if I've the dot here, it's on a red line, which indicates that the gradient is high at this point, so myelin is changing quickly. That same dot back here also happens to be on the line where cortical thickness is changing the fastest. And so these boundaries, they agree with one another. So this is a multimodal posterior boundary for the primary motor cortex. Yeah, kind of.
What about the dots that are in like the dark space?
Here?
No. Still on the gradient, not just.
Yeah, the ones on the other side.
They're on.
No, in the middle one, and then. But that's defined by the borders.
You define it from the other one.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be exactly the same. Like there doesn't have to be gradients.
I mean, the anterior boundary would have been probably delineated with myelin plus some fMRI features that I'm not showing. Helpfully for the sensory motor cortex, Bruce Fitchell and collaborators, they mapped histology to the surface. And so this is a probabilistic map of the primary motor cortex defined histologically mapped to the surface. And the black dots also surround that or follow that very, very nicely. So we have in vivo and histological evidence of the primary motor cortex being here. Yeah. Oh, that's right. Yeah, sorry. So that was a reminder to myself. So once you have these dots, you then go to finish. Fine. And it will ask you a whole bunch of things about what to call it, etc. That's not where you finish saving the file. You need to go to File, Save Manage Files, and then there'll be, sorry Mariana, and then your border file will be here, and then you save it. And now it exists as a saved file. Those are. To answer the question, what did you get these? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You can. Can you catch? Can you catch?
5 minutes later.
I also contributed.
Yeah. Me too.
But I can't catch.
So that's how you save your WB command. That's how you save your border file. Okay, I thought this was really good.
What's the relevance of research then?
you know how to save a life? How to save a life.
Right.
Doesn't
It's
matter.
like Grey's Anatomy series 3 million.
Yeah,
Currently, yeah, that's why you don't recognize anyone there.
except these people are OG. Anyway, doesn't matter. Once you have your border file, you can create an ROI or a mask or whichever. So you need to specify your surface, the border file that you've created, and what you want to call the file output. So this is an example. So we give it the mid-thickness surface. It doesn't really matter what surface you give it because it's just trying to look at neighborhood information or like edges between different vertices. This is the file, the border file that we've created, and we've now delineated area 4 or the primary motor cortex. And then we want to call it a metric file, .shape.gii. Okay, so that's kind of like an applied overview of how we can use.
Do you think it's doable for the DHCP function?
I think so, yeah.
What's the even sensible idea?
I mean, it's quite tricky. I think, depending on the, I think it is possible. I think it just needs to be.
And folding.
Yeah.
It's not even like we've got that many RSMs anyway.
Yeah, there aren't many RSNs. I mean, it'd be interesting to see. I mean, Matt would say don't use diffusion because there's that gyral bias, so you're getting like.
But the noddy looks like mine.
Noddy looks like it looks pretty good. Yeah. So I think it's diffusion in terms of structural connectivity rather than the features of diffusion within the cortex.
The noddy will be better than the wired and the baby.
Probably, yeah. I mean, I guess it's a matter of like looking at the different metrics over like and taking this approach of like how many of the boundaries coincide, what kind of evidence exists for an area being there in the first place, etc. It'll be tricky, but like the NDI maps that Jashin was looking at, V1 looked really nicely delineated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go, Jashin.
So yeah, V1 was nicely defined. I think there was also an area that existed in we don't have it up here, but the parieto-occipital sulcus. That could be the dorsal visual transition area. I think it's just a matter of really looking at the maps, trying to see if you can get get boundaries across multiple metrics, and then trying to see how they coincide with existing literature. Where are we? What ROIs? BalSA. Yeah. So this is a very good website for anything that is like HCP or cortical surface related. If you're wanting to do any data visualization, or you're wanting to download group average templates or group average metric files, or basically any really highly analyzed group average data, it should be on BalSA. I know for my cortical asymmetry paper, we made the data available on BalSA with scene files, and
generally I think we should.
Yeah, we should.
Figures on BalSA. It's really been great for reviewers to actually really look at.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just like the view or the combination of metrics that you want to show. It's all there, so nothing can be hidden.
Yeah, exactly. So for instance, I'll go through and explain or show what Emma said, but yeah, basically BalSA is a really nice way to upload data so that it can be freely downloaded by anybody in the neuroimaging community. It is also a really nice way to make figures, although it takes a little bit of getting used to, but it saves you from making figures over and over and over again. And these things called scene files can be downloaded by anybody and viewed in exactly the same way that you've represented it as a figure in a paper, which I think is really cool.
So to clarify, BalSA is the database.
Yeah.
Scene is it comes with workbench.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so connectome workbench connectome workbench comes with WB View, which allows you to make scene files.
I would highly recommend everybody to figure out how to do this, because once you set it up, then you save it. So if you have to ever make edits to your figure, and you know how OCD I am about your papers, so it'll probably happen. And you can just reload it and change it a bit without having to sort of load up 20 different subject files and put them in different windows for the 20th time.
Yeah, it's super easy. So I'm going to show you how to make BalSA Verde. That was a good one, Logan. Where are we? So this is the page that I was looking at before. This is where you could get the group average HCP parcellation if you wanted. So I've logged in. If you have it's really easy to make an account. It doesn't need to be verified really or anything.
I guess the one thing to say is it has to be group average data. You can't go around sharing individual subjects.
Exactly. Yeah. So
it's all public and open.
Yeah. So yeah. Unlikely to be sharing single subject data.
The DCP is open, but people have to share a data access agreement, and there's constraints. So no single subject files from the DCP would go on here. Would need any study.
Yeah.
The group average is open.
Yeah. So when you log in, this is the page that you. This is the landing page. You can either go to study index, which takes you through all the studies that have been uploaded to BalSA, or you can go to reference index, which has templates and whatnot. So let's say we want to look at cortical parcellations. And it tells you all the files that have been included in this the scene file that the authors have uploaded. It tells you what type of file it is as well. If you want to download just specific files, or you can download all of these files in this exact format by going to download, and it'll tell you how big it is. So you can just download it. What I've done is I've taken a figure from the multimodal parcellation paper, and I've downloaded it as a scene, and I'll just show you why looking at the scenes can be extremely helpful and very easy once you know how to do it. So I've only downloaded a scene for one figure, but for an entire paper you can scroll through all of the figures that have been included in that paper, and you can interrogate them. So like Emma said, it's very good for reviewers if they want to look at a particular view of the cortex, or to look at the values that exist inside an area. Just makes it a lot nicer to, just makes it more open. And that's what we're all about in the metrics lab, openness. Yeah. Cool. So this is the kind of image that you'll be shown with. So it looks exactly like it does in the manuscript, but it's also interactive. So you can rotate things, you can zoom in or out.
It's such a cool.
Yeah, it's really good.
Such a cool viewer, and the fact that you can just do all this.
So it's all lagging.
Open all your tabs and then save it all and reload it later.
Yeah, exactly. And
I still don't see the purpose of flat maps.
Yeah. Okay. Controversial opinion. No.
I've got used to looking at things on inflated surfaces, and that's where I'm going to stay.
Yeah.
Stuck in.
You stay in your ways.
Stuck in that way.
So this is Matt's paper. If we wanted to say, the cool thing about scene files as well is that they come with a specific URL. So all of the data that exists for this figure exist here. I can download it if I want to, or indeed any of the figures that have been included in this paper. So it's super, super useful, and something I would encourage you guys to.
I think everybody should do it, even if you consider yourself like, you know, not just the more applications side of the projects, like the more methods.
I have a question though. Can you also upload, because like, can you also upload stuff that aren't like C files?
What do you mean?
I mean, like, say I have a figure that I made that's like the meta, so it has like some surface thingies, but then I added to it on like space or whatever.
Oh,
No, you literally overload
yeah.
it.
Would I also like, yeah, but there's, I mean, I just mean like, I mean, obviously you can just download it from the paper, but I just mean like, can you also put it in there so that they're all together or no?
I mean, so what you can do is if you have a predominantly like cortical surface figure, you can also like put images into the viewer. So like, just like you could upload an image to a PowerPoint slide, you can do the exact same thing.
Yeah, okay, that's what I meant.
Yeah, so you can do that. Yeah, so like, for instance, yeah. Oh no. So this one? Yeah. So for instance, yeah, so you can do something like this. So this will be a figure. Either you can make this in workbench.
I just meant for ones that like you really can't, you know, like maybe like a method and then there's some error or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah. So if there was like, if this existed as like a JPEG or like a PNG file, this could be just uploaded to the scene and moved there. And that's how like so it's very flexible, super, super cool. Would highly recommend. Obviously I'll be around virtually if people want to know how to use it. So I think that's everything. Just want to say thank you to everybody in the lab for making the last 4 years very, very amazing. I'm very happy to have spent it with you guys. That's all I have to say. Yeah, I need to.
You trying to